Welcome to MSL Talk with Tom Caravella, a podcast specifically designed for MSLs and all things field medical. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. My guest today is Jay Van Horn. He is the Senior Director of Medical Affairs, and we talk about the ultimate guide to an MSL 30, 60, 90-day plan. And Jay crushes this. It's awesome, awesome stuff. I think you guys are really going to like it. Don't forget to follow me on LinkedIn. Check us out on YouTube. All our videos go up on YouTube. And join us for MSL Talk Live, which is typically the first Tuesday of the month at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Check on LinkedIn for times and topics, and that'll be on LinkedIn Live. So if you ever want to go back and watch some of the old ones, they're all the recordings are up on LinkedIn Live. Thanks for joining. What's up, Jay? Welcome to the podcast, man. How you doing?
Doing amazing, Tom. Thank you so much for having me on your program. You know, I wanted to always tell you this. It's like you've done an amazing job with providing the MSL podcast, and I've probably listened to like 75% of them.
What?
I'm sorry, it hasn't been 100%, but you know, I'm always looking for those opportunities to grow professionally from your guests because you know they bring some great information. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to do today.
Well, I got to tell you, I am so grateful that you're here, guys. Just so you know, I know Jay for a long time. I've been trying to. First of all, I tried to get the guy to listen to the podcast for like a year and a half. Finally, He calls you up one day. He goes, "Hey, man, I listened to your podcast. It's really good." I was like, "Dude, I've been trying to tell you." And then it took another year and a half to get him on. So without further ado, Jay, why don't you do an introduction before we jump into this topic that I've been trying to get somebody to do for a long time. So I'm excited to have you do this, but let's do an intro so that everybody knows who you are.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm a pharmacist. I started my career working as an ambulatory care clinical pharmacist after completing my pharmacy practice residency. You know, I've had an amazing career over the last 25 years. I've worked across multiple therapeutic areas, most recently in hematology oncology. I've worked with both large and small companies. You know, it's just been amazing. And I've said this to you in the past. I think being an MSL is the best job in the pharmaceutical industry. And the fact for me, I did that during the first part of my career, and over the last 8 years or so, I've been given an opportunity to lead teams, and it's so great to lead teams and help aspiring MSLs, help MSLs achieve their goals, because there's been so many managers that have done that for me over my career. I know you have a lot of aspiring MSLs that listen to your podcast. I'm really excited to try and help them and get so that they can get one of these great opportunities for themselves, you know. And I know today we're going to be discussing that 30, 60, 90-day plan. What does that look like? And one of the things I'll just start it off with, you know, we have to use that SMART format, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And we'll talk about that today.
Yeah.
But you know, it's not so much important that you put a plan together, but you kind of have to kind of look at what you're doing, how you're doing it, so that you're achieving those goals over you know, that first 30, 60, 90 days.
Awesome. I can't wait, man. I'm excited. I told you guys this was going to be good. So real quick, before we start, I have to do a shout out for our friends in Thailand. So we broke into the top 10 in rankings in the careers category in Thailand. So I want to thank you all for listening. Also want to wish the MSL Talk podcast happy anniversary, because right about now, it's 3 years since we started this broadcast. So happy anniversary to us. And who better person than Jay Van Horn to be on for the 3-year anniversary?
It only took me a year and a half to start listening, but like I said, there's such valuable information. So
you know, better late than never, man. Better late than never.
It's great.
Yeah. And I've had people request this topic. I mean, MSLs, aspiring MSLs, MSL leaders even will be able to learn from this. So when someone is asked to put together a 30, 60, 90-day plan, whether it's for an interview or maybe it's someone who's in a leadership capacity or it's an MSL that's helping out a supervisor in some way, where would you say they should start? What's the beginning? You mentioned this SMART format, but I'll let you, in your own words, talk about if you had to give somebody advice on how to do this, where do they start?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all starts with the job description. I think by starting with the job description, you're going to know kind of the minimal roles and responsibilities that they have to get to. I have used and have requested and I have myself put together a 30, 60, 90 day plan together when interviewing or preparing for a position. I think it's really important for especially aspiring MSLs, as a hiring manager or potential hiring manager, whether they're asked to do it or they do it independently. I think as they go through the steps and those things that we'll talk about today, it'll help put in the perspective of what they need to do at a minimum, which is a job description, to be successful in their new position. More recently, just one quick side story.
Yeah.
I did have we had a position for a recent company that I work for, and I had all three candidates put together a 30, 60, 90 day plan because I thought it would be good. And this was for a associate director level position for national and prioritized accounts. And it was great to kind of see how they were going to approach the position and the things that they were looking to achieve during those first 90 days and kind of the steps that they were going to take to get there.
So you asked them to do it.
Well, yeah, I did for that particular one, but I think, and I've done it for myself. I think whether somebody asks you to do it or you do it independently, especially I would think for an aspiring MSL, if they start to put together their thought process of all the different things that need to be achieved. I mean, it's really simple to look at the job description, but and we'll talk about kind of what you're going to be doing during the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and how you might go about doing that.
So before we get into that, so now you ask people to do it, but what you're saying is that people should be proactive in the interview process and say, hey, you know what? In preparation for this interview, I put together a 30, 60, 90-day plan that I want to share with you. Is that something that they put together in writing and they bring it? Do they just talk about it, or do they do both? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I probably would not say, unless I was asked, I probably wouldn't say that I had done it, but I think it's part of the preparation for having the conversation.
Yeah.
You've kind of had that initial conversation with HR or a recruiter. So you've kind of got your foot in the door, but as you prepare to have that conversation with the hiring manager, I think to put something together, because if, especially if talking to aspiring MSLs, you don't know what they do know. They don't know if they've listened to your podcast. You don't know if they've gone to some workshops. You don't know what they do know about being an MSL. And I've been in those situations where, it's like, I've asked folks, so what do you think you're going to be doing, during the first, couple, 2 or 3 months that you join the organization? And you don't want to respond, well, I'm going to go through training.
Yeah.
Right. Of course you're going to go through training, but what do you think that looks like?
Right.
And then the other part of that is, what do you think you're going to need to do to transition out into the field, right? What are some of the things you'd like to do to transition and be prepared to go out into the field?
No, I think this is great. I think that's awesome advice. I think that it just shows that you can't lose by putting this together, get it together, and either bring it up and refer to it during the interview, or be prepared for somebody to ask you a question where you can throw this in. So I'm dying to get into the nuts and bolts of this. So what does the first 30 days look like, and what should they include so that people will look at that and say, wow, that was a really insightful first 30-day plan or insight into the plan?
Yeah, actually, the first 30 days to me is not that big a deal, because the first 30 days is typically very structured, right?
Okay.
I know one of the things is like, what do you do? I mean, it could be put in a Word document, it could be put in an Excel sheet. If I plan on presenting it, I want to put it in a PowerPoint. So there are different formats to put together. But the other thing I just want to mention as well is, I've said this in the past, is I want MSLs to be the CEO of their regions or their territories. Well, the only way to be the CEO and take ownership is to have a plan, right? It's not somebody else's plan. because the managers aren't out there every day working with them, right? They're
Yeah.
out there letting their folks do the jobs that they were hired to do. And when an individual takes ownership of that territory or region, I mean, that's really ultimately what I want to see. So really during that first 30 day or first, yeah, 30 days, I mean, the first week is really a lot of administrative stuff, right? So, I mean, you don't really necessarily need to go into detail about that because, of course, you're going to have a conversation with your manager. You're going to have a conversation with HR. They're going to be sending you a bunch of documents and things for you to complete and sign off. And, you're going to get your company email and you're going to get access to the corporate portal. And so, really, it's office setup and getting, that set up really the first week or two. The next couple of really the next 2 to 6 weeks is all about disease state and product training. I mean, at a minimum, everybody should know the package insert.
Right.
What is the data that supports the package insert? And then you start to learn more about the clinical trials. You could be also learning about the competitive landscape. If that company has HUR, real world evidence data, if they have pipeline. But, if you go back to that job description, what does the job description say you're going to do? Is it going to be a focus on KOLs? Is it going to be, within that spectrum? Are you going to be focused on institutions? Do you have any what I'll call market access responsibilities? Are you going to go out and do payer presentations and the IDNs and GPOs and pharmacy directors? Of course, if you might be doing some of that, you're going to need to be aware of the HUR real world evidence data. Are you going to be supporting clinical development, doing pipeline presentations? And so, that's all going to be somewhat dictated in the job description, but it also starts to get you to think about all the things you can be doing in preparation for that first 30 days. There's a lot to do, but really that's the most structured part of the first 30 days is going to be dictated by the company.
And would you say that when someone puts this together, should they be extremely detailed? Does it make sense to go real detailed, or they go high level? I would imagine you have to do some level of detail, because if you go too high level, it really doesn't tell them anything. So I would imagine that whether it's PowerPoint, Word document, or an Excel spreadsheet, you're going to have to list out some detail. Do you agree with that?
I think listing out some detail. I mean, I like to list out detail because I like to be very structured in what I do, and make sure I don't forget anything. The other part of all this is, there's detailed in that first 30 days, but the other big part of this 30, 60, 90-day plan is the strategy around how you're going to communicate across the organization. What are the individuals that you're going to need to chat with and meet and be introduced? And that's going to occur during the kind of the end. I like to do it towards the end of the first 30 days. And then, as you go into the second month.
So you're going to say things like, you're going to list, so get just unpacking what you just said in the first 30 days. Don't do this. Don't just say complete training in the first 30 days. What you want to do is you want to go into more detail, show how you're going to go above and beyond, and talk about things like, fully understanding and studying and researching the package insert, understanding the competitive landscape through research and whatever else. And then list all those things that you had mentioned, depending on what it says in the job description. And then at the end, towards the end of the 30 days, proactively connect with internal counterparts to introduce myself and develop internal relationships with, commercial counterparts, market, whatever it might be, managed care, whatever it might be. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So first week administrative. Weeks after that, you can start to go into disease state. So if it's a new therapeutic area for you, you start to say, well, I've taken the opportunity to read the NCCN guidelines relative to the management of a particular disease state. You can list off the number of clinical trials that they've done. You can that are published, that you've read those, and it's like, I'd love to learn more about these clinical trials. You can go on clinicaltrials.gov and see the trials that they've completed as well as the ones they're doing, right? So you kind of have an idea of the direction that they're heading in. And so that also gives you a good perspective. It's like, what are you specifically going to be doing in this new position? Because that's always the question. There are companies out there that will tell you how to do it, when to do it, and how many times to do it. But you want also individuals to be more entrepreneurial and want to be lifelong learners. So they're out there going and getting the information on their own as they consider this opportunity with this new company.
Yep. Got you. Okay. So let's talk about the next piece, which would be from the next 30 days, which would be from 30 to 60.
Yeah. So that's where, you as I was mentioned, during the first 30 days, you want to start to set up meetings, but during that second month, start to have meetings. So, within medical affairs, you have the VP of medical affairs, you have medical directors, you have medical information. You could have an operations person who is supporting you doing investigator-sponsored trials, unrestricted educational grants, but they're the person that kind of everything that's non-clinical helps you do your job better. They're a great resource to you, and the majority of companies have individuals like that. You could have an HUR liaison. Of course, you want to be aware of pharmacovigilance. It's not just AE reporting. It's also making sure that any untoward effect is reported of a drug, because that is reportable. A lot of people don't realize that. If they have a nurse educator team, you want to chat with them. If they have a medical affairs market access liaison, right? Do they have responsibility? Do they have somebody that does that? So that will also help for you to understand the kind of the market that they're in. And then last, clinical operations. Probably 75% of the companies I've worked for in the past, I have not worked directly with clinical operations. About 25% of the companies I have, and so, will you be supporting clinical operations, doing site evaluations and things like that? But a lot of that's going to be within the job description. And then the other part I'll just briefly mention is the commercials. So interactions with commercial are strictly dependent on a company, right? And we know how to do things right, but regional sales director. I mean, I think meeting the regional sales director, maybe jumping on their team call and being introduced, but you need to follow whatever the corporate guidance is as far as it relates to working with commercial, as well as the market access team. You've got regional account managers and key account managers and field reimbursement managers, but that's a great time during that second month to build this relationship, and then also start to figure out your territory plan. So you've kind of been through the disease state and product information. You're kind of wrapping that up, and now you're starting to look at KOLs, right? A lot of companies will provide a list, and but if they don't provide a list, a lot of that information you can go out and get on your own as well. To start to transition into that, because that second month is where you're focusing on, who are the KOLs, are they a tier 1 or are they a tier 2? What are the key institutions? What are the key national and regional meetings? And so you're starting to figure out your plan, so that usually by the end of the second month, start of the third month, you're starting to think about setting up a plan to get out into the field.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and that's really kind of what we're getting at, right? So the first 30 days is a lot of administrative, a lot of research. You're figuring your way around, you're getting through onboarding, you're getting through training, scientific, you're getting all that science down, and then you're getting familiar with the players. So you start to develop a strategy. And then after that, I'm assuming that the next step is to get out into the field. So would you say that after the first 60 days, people should be prepared to and need to document in this plan the KOL engagement piece? Or am I jumping too far ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think researching the KOLs, before you, as anybody evaluates a new opportunity, I think you could easily put together a list of 20 of the top individuals within your area, right? You look at the publications, you look at the folks that are part of the guidelines for that therapeutic area. You look at clinicaltrials.gov. You look at national and regional conferences, kind of the information from the past to see who's presented on a particular topic. Then you start to go to the major institutions within your geography. You go to the department website, and then you start to look at who focuses on what within that department. And then at the end of the day, you're starting to formulate, okay, as I've learned about the strategy for that company, how do I execute on that strategy, and who do I do it with? Whether it's a KOL, whether it's an institution, whether it's a conference, those are the big buckets initially, because ultimately it's about executing on a strategy and the clinical insights that you either reinforce. Hey, here's the strategy. Here's the insight that supports that strategy. Or are you finding out new insights that and maybe you need to change the strategy? Because ultimately it's about bringing value to not only the KOL, but it's also bringing value back to the organization. And that's through clinical insights.
Right. So I'm going to take a pause here for a second, because I'm assuming that before you get to the interview where you would be in a situation where you need to either discuss this or present this, there's going to be interviews beforehand. Maybe it's an initial phone interview with you or with HR. What questions would you say people need to ask in early interviews to help prepare them to put this together?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of questions there. It's like, is it a new company? is it a new company who's launched a product? Is it an older company? There's a lot of information that you can get on your own. I think you'll obviously have the job description, and so to me, it's asking insightful questions around the expectations of the position, and actually leveraging some of the research that you've done beforehand, and share with them how you might be an asset for the organization.
Right. Yeah.
I've been in situations where I've talked to candidates, and it's like, you ask them, like, so why do you want to join the company that I'm currently working for? And well, you have a position.
Yeah.
Well,
I need a job.
like, yeah, I need a job. And if you start to, if they've taken the time to read their financial statements, to look at how the company's doing, the direction that the company's headed in from a product as well as a pipeline presentation, it's really gaining some insights into what they are looking to do over the next 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, I think it's totally inbounds and expected that in an interview you ask questions like, hey, what are you looking for in this candidate? Can you describe the ideal candidate for this position? Or what are some of the most critical factors for this MSL as they head into this territory? Or what are some of the critical issues that this MSL might face in this territory? Or what information can you share with me about this specific territory that might be able to help me as I think about this position? So I think if you ask some really good open-ended questions about really kind of specifically about the territory, what the desired candidate or ideal candidate looks like, you could start to piece together some of this by almost asking for the answers to the test. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I think the other thing I just want to briefly mention is it's also important to ask about the culture. I mean, I think that asking about the corporate culture, the team culture, and kind of what they're looking for in the next individual, because I've worked on many teams over the years, and so you want a diverse team. Diversity comes from education. It comes from a lot of different places. It also comes from experience. You could have a team that has some very experienced MSLs and some aspiring MSLs, and so you always want that mixture of individuals. And so you can start to gain some insight as you think about the culture of the company, the culture of the team, and kind of how this individual might fit within that culture, because ultimately, it's the culture that brings teams together.
Exactly. Yeah. And some companies are really, really specific about their culture, core values. They put it up on their website. They talk about it. It's a mistake not to look for that information. It's a mistake not to talk about it or at least ask about it. So I'm glad you brought that up. The other thing that you mentioned that I want to get back to is that there are variables that exist in this that you have to keep in
Absolutely.
mind. What's the size of the company, the therapeutic area? Are those all things people need to start to consider?
Yeah, it's been my experience with larger organizations, things tend to be more structured, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's just because you want to treat folks the same and equally across organizations. So things typically are more structured. With smaller companies, there is structure, but it's more entrepreneurial. And so, looking for individuals, especially in smaller organizations where I've spent the last half of my career, folks that have that entrepreneurial nature to kind of, be really good at their day job. But then, and we hadn't talked about this, but as they start to close out, the initial training period, how do they get involved in projects, right? What do they think? And the things I've asked candidates in the past is like, okay, I know about professional development, right? What about personal development? What are some areas that you want to grow in and gain experience? And I always make the caveat is you got to be really good at your day job. And then, what are some things that we can get you involved in and grow you personally within your career?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that people always want to know that. They always want to know that there's someone who has both the professional and personal interest in mind, that they are balanced, well-rounded, they have a do what it takes attitude, and they want to grow with the organization, but also personally. Getting back to the idea of doing this plan. So let's just say that you're tasked, like, you're not doing this just to go in and be prepared. You were asked to do this. So Jay Van Horn is the hiring manager. You're interviewing, and you say, okay, before your final interview, we need you to come in and prepare a 30, 60, 90-day plan. You just gave really, really good information, probably too good. I might not even release this episode. I think it's too good. It's too good. So aside from that, does it make sense for that candidate to maybe reach out to colleagues, or maybe if they know somebody in the organization, or maybe they reach out to, let's say there's 8 MSLs on the team. Is it out of bounds for that candidate to reach out to one of the MSLs and say, hey, want to see if I can pick your brain for an informational interview, and then maybe see if that person can help share insights on the culture, expectations, or is that taking it too far?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I mean, I think I think it definitely can be beneficial. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But there's yeah, I guess it all depends because you don't know what questions are being asked.
Yeah.
If you ask a question, does that mean maybe you don't know what you're asking, but then starts to questions whether the candidate is a good fit,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think what I've done in the past is do a lot of research on individuals on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
kind of see what their areas of interest are. Uh, you know, um, Go to the corporate website to learn about folks. I think you can reach out to folks, but it's I think really tricky, especially in today's environment, because you just don't know. You just
Yeah.
don't know.
It's a slippery slope. You got to be careful, because if you reach out to somebody and they take it the wrong way, or if you annoy someone and they say, oh, that person's interviewing, or let's say that person's now all of a sudden that MSL is on the interview panel, and they're
Right.
like, oh, this person reached out to me, and whatever. So, you know, um, I I've known people to do. That's why I'm bringing it up, because I've known people to do it, but I don't know if it's always the best advice.
Yeah, I can't say that I've done it, but what I can tell you I've done. I typically do a lot of research, and if somebody knows somebody, you know, um, I might chat with them to say, hey, I see that you're connected with this person, and is there anything I'm going to be interviewing with them next week? Is there anything you could share with me that you think would be beneficial to me? I think that's completely within scope. Um, I think it could be okay to reach out, but I think you might want to do a podcast on that specifically to say,
Yeah.
if you do this, these are some of the lessons that we've learned over time from individuals who've done it.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of hesitant because I haven't done a lot of that. So I'm really careful to give advice because I don't want to give the wrong advice.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a slippery slope. So what, as we close this out, what other like last pieces of advice would you give people to make them stand out? So this is not totally uncommon that people are asked to do a 30, 60, 90-day plan. In your experience, which ones typically stand out to you?
The ones that stand out, I was thinking about the question. It's like, a lot of companies do clinical presentations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really the purpose of having somebody come in and do a clinical presentation is, can they stand up in front of the audience and give a presentation? After kind of putting my thoughts together around this podcast, it's like, I think would probably be appropriate what they're going to do during the first 30, 60, 90 days, right?
Mm.
Who are the KOLs? Who are the institutions? Are there patient advocacy groups? What are all the different things to think about as you transition out to the field? And that's the biggest part. I think is to come prepared. One of the things I do that people don't talk about is, if the company's publicly traded, I'll go in and read their annual report
Yeah.
or look at the annual report presentation, because there's I did get my MBA. I can say one of the benefits of getting my MBA is understanding what a 10K is, but there's, everything's disclosed within there. So if there's challenges with clinical trials, it's kind of the scientific acumen as well as the business acumen. Do they understand? Because at the end of the day, pharmaceutical companies are businesses, right?
Yep.
And within their financial reporting, it outlines the challenges that they're having, as well as the steps that they're taking to be successful. And so that's like another thing that I look at, because you want to see how well a product is doing, and that's disclosed within those documents. And I think that could potentially set you apart, as well as just having a really good understanding of the therapeutic area, the top KOLs, kind of how they're positioned within guidelines. Now, one of the things we haven't talked about as we close up is reaching out. I think reaching out to some KOLs or some folks within that therapeutic area
Mm-hmm.
to find out more information about what they think about that company or that product is something I think that I've seen in the past, and could be beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a position where you have relationships or you can do that, I absolutely think you should. I also think that it's just, and getting back, I said this before, I'm going to say it again. I think it's just really important to ask good questions. Ask good questions early and often. Make sure that you're really super inquisitive, and you show the organization that you either are a good MSL because of your engagement skills, or you can be a really good MSL because of you. Because that's what MSLing is all about, is engagement. There's a scientific piece of it. We all know that. But the real crux of it is the engagement portion of this and being good at that. This all falls in line with that. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, when like today, we've been chatting for 35 minutes. I don't know. It seems like we've been chatting for 5 minutes, but if you're talking with a hiring manager, if you're talking with a KOL, if you're talking with a colleague, and you have that back and forth conversation, and the reason you're doing that is because you've done your homework. You're prepared, right? Where did the time go? We showed mutual interest, and then you walk away with, hey, there's a great conversation today. Would love to chat with you in a month or so, right? And follow up and chat about something. I mean, that's what being a good MSL is to take that conversation and that engagement to the next level, and ultimately bring insights back to the company.
Yeah, man, this went fast. You know why? Because you're so easy to talk to, Jay.
You're easy to talk to, Tom.
I'm a genius for having you on. You made me look good. So, guys, if you got value in this, please share it. I think this was an awesome, awesome episode. Jay, thank you again. I appreciate you coming on, man.
No, thank you for having me on. I'm sorry it's taken so long. And I truly regret that it took me so long to catch on, because this is a great podcast, and I think there's a lot of value in it.
Well, we did it, man. And thank you guys for listening. You all have an awesome rest of your day, and join us again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe so that you don't miss episodes in the future, and feel free to leave a rating or a review or a comment. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.